Robert, let's just kick right off. You are the chief pollster at Trafalgar, and you've been showing a different kind of result to some of the other pollsters. We've spoken to Nate Silver, who gave us kind of his overview of the polling situation. I also spoke to my former colleague at YouGov, Doug Rivers, who's the chief scientist there, and he was pretty bullish, I would say, on the Biden advantage. So tell us what numbers you're seeing at Trafalgar.
We think that what's happening is what is technically called the social desirability bias. And what that means is people give an answer to a question being asked by a live caller that is less about honesty and more about being judged positively by the person asking the question. So when there is a candidate who is polarizing, who it isn't politically correct to say you're for, you tend to give an answer that you think will, kind of make you look best. And this was very evident in 2016. We saw it in 2018 in the Florida governor's race. And now we're seeing it this year. And probably more this year. As I say quite often, 4 years ago, the worst thing they said about the Trump supporters is they were deplorable. Mm-hmm. This year, it's quite worse. And we're seeing this. And where this effect is most amplified is with a live caller. And so we actually think polls done by live callers are the worst way to poll this race. And most of these polls that the media accepts as the standard are live call based. They actually suggest that those people who don't use live calls exclusively are not effective, not legitimate polls.
So what's your method at Trafalgar?
Well, we have, if you just look us up, we have quite a few different methods that we mix together so that we can get a more accurate balance, whether it be live, automated, text message, email, and a few different platforms we use over digital means. But think about it this way. There are things that a person says on that Facebook page where there are pictures of their family that their colleagues see, and there are things they say on that private one they set up just to vent. The problem is what they say on that private page when they think they're anonymous is what's in their heart. And what's in their heart is how they vote. And so people are kind of putting on their best behavior with a live person. So what we found is that social desirability bias, as it was 4 years ago, is between 3 and 5%, and we expect it could be more, of people who just aren't going to tell you where they really are. And they're going to give you an answer that judges them the least.
So how do you find that 3 to 5% number?
Well, in 2016, we did it by asking the question, all right, we understand who you're for. Now, who do you think the majority of your neighbors are for? And that's what I have learned over the years. Is that's a little device you use to get them to kind of admit who they're for without having to accept what they perceive to be the blowback of being for that. Well, we're not going to tell people how we're doing it this year because now everyone is using what we did in 2016, and I have yet to see any of them give us any credit. So yes, we've developed other questions, additional questions that we ask that give us a sense of where you really are. So the people that are answering a third-party candidate who have no history of voting any sort of third party in a primary, the people who are answering that they are undecided, the people who are giving lukewarm answers on these when there's low intensity, we can look in there and see, okay, the other questions give us a sense of where they really are, so we can estimate what the bias is. Now, we can't eliminate it, but we can estimate it. But the first way you avoid it is by providing people with the most perceived anonymous way to participate in the poll. Because once they think it's anonymous, they're more honest.
So we, as I mentioned, we spoke to Doug Rivers from YouGov. Now they use a large online panel, so it's not a live calling method. And they have, I guess, the advantage also that they can recontact people from their panel who they spoke to 4 years ago and 2 years ago. So his view was that 7% of those Trump voters in 2016 will switch to Biden, and only 1% will switch in the other way. So that's why he's pretty confident at a strong Biden advantage. What do you say to that?
Well, I say I can't debate those numbers. We certainly don't recall people. We believe in truly anonymous and truly random stratified polling, so we don't do that. I can say this, that what we see is there are a lot of people who did not vote for Trump last time who intend to vote for him this time. And I would not think that number is less than 7%. We see a tremendous movement in the Hispanic and African American community. We have yet to encounter a battleground state where Trump was doing less than 15 with black voters and Biden was doing more than 80. We have not encountered a state where Trump was under 30 and Biden was over 60. Those numbers are devastating for the other side. Those, you know, Democrats count on 80% plus of the black vote. Yeah, certainly, there are Trump voters who are not voting for him this time. There are voters who voted for someone else last time who are now considering Trump. The other thing is the number of people who didn't vote for either person that are coming out. We see it. There's a lot of new voter registration, but more over the support that Trump has are people who are actually going to participate who didn't participate last time, who have been registered voters, and for whatever reason, we call them lapsed voters. They haven't participated in the process for quite some time. What we do see, though, is, and this, well, one of the things I say all the time is, this is not a persuasion election. It is a motivation election. Both sides have enough voters to win the election. This is going to come down to who turns their voters out. There's no question in my mind about this. This will be a very large turnout election, and the team that does the best job in getting their people to vote is going to be the one that wins. There's not a set number of people that that are going to vote, and it's just a matter of fighting for some undecideds.
So I want to move in a moment to hearing what your headline numbers are, but just before we do that, this question of shy Trumpers, when we spoke to Doug Rivers about that and asked him what his view was, he said, well, if that was a real effect, he would have seen Trump doing better in 2016 in places like Palo Alto, where he lives, which is an ultra Democrat, where you would imagine the kind of shame of being a Trump supporter would be highest. But in fact, what he saw was the opposite, so that Hillary overperformed in those very kind of Democratic areas, and Trump overperformed in the Republican areas where you wouldn't expect shy Trump to be a factor. How do you explain that?
Well, I don't know what his definition of Republican areas are. If he considers rural and working class America Republican areas, I'll take that. But what we've seen and what we've experienced is the blue collar Midwestern voters that were considered Democrats for the last 20 something years, who had been part of the Reagan Democrat coalition. They came back, and they came back because they felt like there was a candidate who more appealed to regular working class Americans than any Republican ever had. I mean, let's face it, Mitt Romney was the opposite of a Republican who appealed to working class Americans. So I don't know what his definitions are, Republican areas and Democrat areas, but what I do know is that the type of people that tend to be shy Trump voters are exactly those who, people say, what is a shy Trump voter? I say, if you live in a neighborhood where putting a Trump sign in your yard might get your house toilet papered or egged, you're a shy Trump voter. If telling your friend or your family would start discussions that would get hostile, you might be a shy Trump voter. There are so many examples of people who are in areas where they don't feel comfortable saying. And the number also grows because there are people who are absolutely, a lot of them were suburban, upper middle income, higher educated mothers who just did not like Trump on a personal level. But they saw this level of violence and they saw all the chaos that's ensued. And what we hear from them is, I don't like Trump, but I can't be for that. It's almost like they've been looking for a reason to hold their nose and vote for Trump, and they found it.
So where does this take you then in terms of numbers? I mean, what do you have as an overall poll situation, and how do you see it in the different battleground states?
Well, all that matters is battleground states. So I don't. Talking about who's winning the national popular vote is irrelevant. I don't bother with it. What does matter, and and as you know from our record in 2016, we not only got more battleground states right than any other firm, we actually got the 306 to 232 number right. What we found then, we identified a lot of states people thought were going to be wins for Hillary were not. What we're finding now is we just put out a poll last week for Florida with Trump having a 3-point lead, and we were roundly criticized for it. And then earlier this week, NBC News put out one that showed it dead even. So theirs is closer to ours than anyone else has been. And what we showed now is a very competitive race in, I'll just run through a few key states that kind of give you a sense of where we are. Okay. Arizona, very, very close. I would say probably too close to call. Michigan, I see a Trump lead, a definite Trump lead. Wisconsin, I see a Trump lead. Minnesota, I see dead even. North Carolina, Ohio, Trump wins. Texas and Georgia are not battleground states. Trump will win, and it won't be within 3 points. And Pennsylvania, I think, is tight. So the scenario I've just gone over there is a Trump in the mid 270s, possibly getting to just below 280, and it is just 270 to win. So right now, I would say if the election were held today, he would probably eke out a victory.
And what do you see as a trajectory? Are you seeing any movement in those polls? Is it getting closer, or is Trump's lead extending as far as you see?
I would say it's a very slow extension, if an extension at all. And these things, these elections go up and down. The debates will have an impact, but early voting will have an impact. And this is politics in the United States. I mean, if you remember the Access Hollywood tape, reshuffled the cards at one point. Emails reshuffle the cards at one point. There's a lot of campaign time coming. I tell people every day this campaign is like a lifetime away still. This election is not around the corner. It is a far away when you consider how much things change in a 24-hour news cycle. Politics that moves the speed of Twitter. So a lot can come and go between then and now.
Did you expect Trump to do better with voters as the campaign progresses? I mean, do you have any?
I expect, all things being equal, as the concern and the attitude about the virus changes, and we are seeing a significant change there. We have this question about how you are relating to the virus, how you're dealing with it, and the answer we used to see the most of was people who were extremely cautious and extremely worried, and now our answer of they're not worried at all about it, and the more common answer has become the one that is, I'm going to do what I can to keep my family safe, but I'm not going to live in fear, and I'm going to go about living my life. That plus I'm not worried about it at all are well over 50% now, and it's moving. And it's why people get frustrated about any talk of more lockdowns. It's just the idea of they're ready to get back to it. They're ready to wear their mask, wash their hands, keep their distance, but they're not going to just hide around, they're not hiding in their houses anymore. They're done with all that.
You actually think that COVID-19 could become an electoral plus for Donald Trump over time?
I think it more depends on how Biden talks about it. Shortly after his convention, he talked about there might, if there was a need for another lockdown, he would do it. I think if you would ask, just from what I've seen, if you would ask the question, is there any scenario where there should be another lockdown? I think if the question was about this particular virus, people would say that there's nothing worth that. That they really feel like everybody knows how to be safe now. They knows how to minimize the risk, and they don't want to see the economy wrecked and their lives wrecked when they think they can handle the risk to a reasonable level, doing the precautions that we all agree are the right ones.
Just to return to the poll numbers for one moment, the whole difference you explained between you, because it's really quite substantial. Like in Wisconsin, for example, YouGov are just showing, I think they said they saw a 10-point or more lead for Biden. So, we're talking a very big difference. Is that all done by this adjustment that you do, where you
Well, it's not. We do an adjustment. That's all I'm saying. That's how we can tell you what the vote is going to be. The adjustment that I think some of the media are talking about is on our very last poll in any given election. We will eliminate the undecided with an adjustment. We don't do that before that last poll, so we've made no adjustment. What we do is we proceed and we do it in the fashion that we've done it, where one of the other things that I would offer is a big difference is we don't believe in long questionnaires. We think people are busy. We think they have lives to live. I don't know about you, but I don't know a single person who, if their phone rang when they were on the way to the house with an armful of groceries, maybe some children in tow, and somebody asked them, would you like to participate in a poll of 35 questions? They would say yes. Our polls take less than 3 minutes to finish. They're almost never more than 9 questions. And I think you eliminate average people at an alarming rate when you run these polls that are such deep in questions. You get people who care too much about politics. I am interested in measuring the opinion of those who think about politics very rarely, whereas most polls measure the opinion of those who have strong opinions about politics and don't mind spending 15 minutes of their time to share them.
Do you think among those people who care less, that enthusiasm is greater on the Trump side than on the Biden side?
I think caring less and enthusiasm don't equate. And it's not necessarily caring less, it just means they're busy. They have lives, they have children, they have work. They just don't have the luxury of sitting around watching 24-hour news all day. I mean, there are a group of people who are at that point in their lives where they're just literally busy. They're exhausted. They might take in an hour of news the whole day. They're going to spend a little bit of time on Facebook. You probably know that. You're probably one of them.
I guess I'm not asking, you said it's a motivation election, not a persuasion election. So how does that play into the motivation then? I mean, it would advantage the Democrats if more of their supporters are kind of het up and political, because it makes it more likely that they'll turn out in the polls?
Well, again, I think you're equating two things that I wouldn't equate. Enthusiasm about politics is not the same as thinking about it all day. Just because you don't like the way things are going and you're going to vote against Trump, or you think he's done a good job, doesn't mean your world revolves around watching 24-hour news and talking politics all day. You might still be busy. You might still have a very active life that doesn't allow a lot of time for political speculation and political participation. You don't have to go to a rally to be fired up about Trump. You don't have to go to a march to be fired up about Biden. You just have to have an opinion that doesn't necessarily reflect how often you engage in political activity.
So if you're right, Mr. Cahaly, and Trump does have an advantage, how do you explain that? Why do you think it is that his supporters are going to turn out in such number, and that he's even going to win new supporters, given that he's had such a difficult year, the disease is not perceived as having been well handled, the economy is in trouble? Where's this enthusiasm coming from?
I will tell you something I was told a long time ago when I first started being involved in politics. People vote against things, not for things. Until about 6 months ago, there were a lot of people motivated to vote against Donald Trump. But then, in the wake of the tragedy of Mr. Floyd being murdered, there were protests. And some of those protests turned into violence. And that violence turned into a defund the police movement, a Black Lives Matter movement that went beyond simply protecting Black lives, a call for statues to be torn down. I mean, we got to the point a week before July 4th where people were suggesting Mount Rushmore was offensive. And all of a sudden, Americans who weren't even necessarily big fans of Donald Trump said, what is happening in my country? There became a genuine debate as to whether America's foundation, its principles, its purpose was good or bad. And people still believe in America. And if you make that choice, one side thinks that America has a history to apologize for and isn't a good force in the world, and the other side feels like America is a good force in the world and has a history to learn from, but certainly a history that is also very positive in many ways. That's not a good scenario for an American to get elected president. I think Joe Biden's on the wrong side of that.
So if that's right, I mean, Nate Silver was saying that the moment he saw the biggest slump in support for Trump was during that moment when he went outside the White House with the Bible, and he cleared the streets and he stood outside of the chapel and held the Bible. Apparently that actually was a negative moment for him and he lost support.
I'm not talking about that moment. Again, that's not the moment to vote against. I can see how that moment could do it. But the slump I'm talking about is the slump that starts every time somebody shared a video of somebody else throwing a Molotov cocktail in the street of a town. Every time somebody is on, people see messages about defunding police and people rallying and talking about killing policemen and how that would be fair. That's the stuff that also motivates people to vote against. And that stuff is not happening in a vacuum. It took Biden's campaign and a month to actually admit they were against the violence. That they saw. Here's the thing: what politicians say means very little to me. What politicians do means everything. And the fact that Biden kind of reversed course and started criticizing the violence after months of embracing it or suggesting it doesn't exist tells me he knows it's real. And what Nate Silver says, this is the guy who said Hillary had a 7% chance of being president. I dismiss that offhand. I'm not interested.
Robert Cahaly, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts this morning. I'd love us to catch up with you again later in the campaign and see if we've seen any movement.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there will be.